Welcome back to the Conversion Code podcast. I am your host, Travis Halverson. I'm just kidding. This is Nikki Pais. I am here with Jeremy Jenks. Thanks for being here, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me, Nikki.
Today,
you don't know how excited I am to be on here.
I guarantee you everybody's excited to talk about what we're going to cover today. We will be going over what it takes to build a business that is focused on conversion and some of the changes that you've seen, and then what it takes to hold everybody accountable. Jeremy, how long ago did y'all start?
So I've been doing real estate for 15 years total.
Mm-hmm.
Scott and I started this business about 7 years ago now. We officially, it was about 2015 when we formed our LLC paperwork. And, in 2016, we actually got up and got rolling. And it was the first bullpen that we built full of agents was myself, and the paint was still drying at a stand-up desk. And I was looking, I had a good window view, though. I could see out the window, so I was excited about that. So, yeah,
so then
7 years.
You in the one window, I believe that there was a way that you and Scott came to know each other. How did that happen?
So interestingly enough, we had the same coach here in town, and we got to know him. I got to know him. Scott got to know him, and he, through coaching with us, obviously, and learning our goals, realized that we both wanted to start a very similar focused real estate team.
Oh, wow.
And he said, you know what, guys, I never do this because, coaching's very personal. I don't share anyone's personal details, but all I'm going to say is I really think you two should meet.
Wow.
And we respected him so much that both of us were like, yeah, he's never said anything like that before, and we knew he knew us well. So if he was introducing us, we thought it would probably be a pretty good meeting to take. So we ended up having breakfast at Cracker Barrel that lasted about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and we just laid out all the plans and thoughts and stuff that we had for starting real estate teams, which at the time we were both going to do separately. And then, over the course of months of planning and whatnot, we decided to bring it together.
So really, that's kind of what turns into the heart of the business is knowing the right people, and the people ultimately being the backbone to each aspect. So now, you start out in the paint drying bullpen, right? Yeah. And then what takes you from there to here? What were the steps, especially revolving around, people and changes that happened?
Well, to talk about the heart of the business and talk about our heart, I got to mention this. One of the things that we noticed, he and I both worked for developers. We both worked on site. And Myrtle Beach is an interesting place to do business. There's a lot of agents in flip-flops and tank tops and whatnot. I mean, it's pretty funny. And I actually just heard this statistic. It's not uncommon, but nationwide, if you did more than 4 deals last year, you're in the top 8% of NAR right now.
Ooh.
Right? So that's it.
That's huge.
I think that's even more drastic here at the beach. And I've always said, the top 10% of the agents here at the beach do 80 to 90% of the business, right? So that math kind of flows. And so what Scott and I, what bonded us initially was we said we would rather have 10 high-producing agents with a ton of accountability, a ton of collaboration between the team. Everybody's working, everybody's in the office, high energy, have that kind of group and that kind of office, rather than have 100 agents all hang their license. Okay, so that's the belief we had when we founded it, and we started with that idea, but it's still, even with that being one of I would say our core principles, our core beliefs, it's still so easy to get off track. And so, you asked about the people. We started hiring agents. We started hiring admin. We're talking about being accountable. We're trying to set examples of being accountable, because I've always lived within our own systems, being in sales. So I'm like leading by example, if you will.
Right, and because you're doing both sides.
Yeah. So managing and selling. And so even with me being in the systems, it is still very easy to get off track and realize that, you've talked about it till you're blue in the face. You've built a culture, though, where we talk about it. We don't necessarily produce the results or do it. Right? Even as much as we have. So we've had the moments in our, you asked about this path, and in our last 7, almost 8 years now, we've had moments where we've gotten off track and we've realized it, and we always course correct.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taken a lot of a lot of failing forward, really.
Mm-hmm.
A
And
lot of failing forward.
one of the things that I remember, like coming and joining Oak and Ocean, was that I spoke with you and Scott out in California at the KW family reunion, and one of the things that like was a turning point in our conversation, and it sounded like with Oak and Ocean, is that y'all decided that y'all would make such a big dream with Oak and Ocean that other people would be able to fit their entire dreams into that cloud, right? And
Absolutely.
so that all of a sudden, what you're talking about with finding the right people who dream big and then are aligned with a company that allows that sort of room to happen. I mean, that's the accountability part. Then everybody is trying to get to the next step. So I love that. I think
Yeah,
that's great.
let me give you my 2 cents on that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to go back to the beginning, we started with the best people we could possibly find,
Mm-hmm.
right? We started with some great people. We've been focused on this the entire time, but over the years, we've gotten a little bit smarter about maybe what the position was, and so we'd find someone that was a better fit for that position. Who then once you're surrounding yourself with top talent, it becomes easier to attract other top talent.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward to when we're in Anaheim and we're meeting you, somebody who we initially met and we're like, wow, this is really top talent. We want her to be on our team. I don't think we would have been as successful in that conversation 5 or 6 years ago because we didn't have all the pieces in place, right? We had to
Wow.
fail forward for a while.
Sure.
Okay. So then fast forward, you get to a place where you're able to attract top talent from across the country to
Mm-hmm.
move here to little old Myrtle Beach. And what we're able to do now is build a much bigger world where, like you said, other people's dreams can live within that,
Yeah.
right? And so, that looks like everything for you guys, like for some action steps for anybody who's listening to this, that looks like anything from talking to your team and making sure that they're reaching their individual goals, making sure you know what their goals are and you're coaching to them, making introductions. We've introduced you, Travis,
Definitely.
Ryan, to a lot of people across the country that are, pretty powerful entities, I guess, in real estate. And you never know what'll happen from making those connections and whatnot. And we've done a lot of that as well.
As somebody who is, not on the side of having created business, but being a part of it, the work that y'all done, it really shows, right? There were clearly opportunities where something could have stayed off kilter, and instead there was always, a vision that you worked towards, and the results have continued to follow. And I want to get into some of the nitty gritty about, the
Absolutely.
accountability within the systems to make sure that everything is really staying in the course that y'all have set. How are you double checking with your databases? What are you doing on the back end to make sure that everything is staying in line?
Wouldn't you be the best one to answer that question? Since you're my database manager and my lead ISA. But, no, we do. I can just talk about from a business standpoint, we've built a lot of backstops into our system. Okay. And so what happens initially is the agents feel this, well, wait a minute, do they think I'm not doing my job? Well, yes, sometimes you're not. Okay. That's what we've seen. We've seen that across every single team that we've analyzed. Okay. It's not just us, but it's not coming from a position of you should do this or else. It's
No.
coming from a position of let us help you.
And that's the
right?
accountability. Yep.
And it's like a double layer of accountability because we're like, hey, did you call Mr. and Mrs. Johnson last week? It looks like there's a note in there that you were going to. If you're overwhelmed, let me help you.
Definitely.
And I gotta give credit. Before you came on with us, we had Travis came on with us about a year, I think, before.
Okay.
And Travis was the first one who brought to the ISA position, right? Brought to that inside sales position that I'm going to help you from a position of like I'm serving the agent.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not tattling on you, which can ruin the culture a little bit. But he did a great job of saying, hey, I think part of my job should be just to help double check from a position of helpfulness, and it just immediately made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can, typically sometimes there's that little bit of tension between the agents and the ISAs. And it's hey man, why you keep dropping the ball here? Like, come on, we got to go. And like, that is where accountability can kind of head in the wrong direction a little bit. So I think Travis set the tone. I want to mention that, give him some credit there.
Shout out
And
to
then
Trav.
you've come in and picked that baton up, and you're carrying it forward in the same way. For example, the accountability meetings that you were doing, I talked to 2 or 3 of our agents when I'm doing my coaching this week, and they were excited to meet with you.
Oh man.
Right? They know when you're coming to them and you're helping to brainstorm, they're only going to get better,
Yeah.
So
I think, Trav was like such a positive culture ad, it sounds like, and it helped because you're right, the ISA position to an agent position, if the culture doesn't feel like we're working towards the same goal, it could feel like an us versus them thing instead.
Yeah.
And so seeing somebody already doing it, so successfully, that makes, entering that seat even easier to do. And some of the other things, though, I mean, outside of inside sales, right, there are other things as a business that y'all have in place, including, bi-weekly role plays. We have our L10 meetings. We have an entire sales meeting where no matter what, all agents are showing up and they are coming together to hear what's local in the market, to make sure that each other is, are we seeing the same things in contracts and so on. How many items would you say like it takes to keep something cohesive?
So yeah, just because, you mentioned some of the details, like we want our agents to be at our role play meetings. We want our agents to be at our bi-weekly meeting, at a bare minimum. If you're one of the Eagles on the team and you're out just absolutely killing it, and I only see you at role plays and meetings, great. Go write those contracts. What can we do to help you? If you're on the flip side, if you're a brand new agent, I'm not sure exactly what you're doing. You need to be in the office. Definitely. Because that's where you're going to learn. That's where you're going to grow. That's where you're going to hear the conversations that the other agents are making. That's where you're going to be able to connect with us, and you're going to learn what, services that the other departments
and you're building
provide.
Consistency.
Absolutely. You're building that consistency in yourself, because I do see it's very, like, the real estate license is a license to freedom. It's also a license to failure.
Oof.
You have to be very careful the way because the first person you have to hold accountable is yourself. If you're not holding yourself accountable, there's not a whole lot we can do.
And how do you have, in instances where there's a tough accountability conversation, how do you approach that? What does that look like?
I'll tell you exactly what that looks like for me. I follow 2 different things that everybody here can read and check into and follow. First one is the 5th habit, Stephen Covey's 5th habit of highly effective people, which is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So whenever I sit down with somebody, I'm going to say, hey, here's what I'm seeing, here's what's going on, tell me your side of the story, because I'm a big believer that until you get past some of the BS that maybe we tell ourselves in our head, right? Then you can actually get to where you can affect somebody. And the second thing is the book. Susan Scott wrote a phenomenal book called Fierce Conversations. I recommend it to everyone in real estate, whether you're having fierce conversations with your clients, fierce conversations with each other, or in this case, I'm sitting down with an agent having a conversation about accountability. She outlines a process for how to do that, and it's similar to what Stephen Covey says, but you lay out a couple of the issues that you've had, give an example or 2, and then listen. Right? Listen to that person like they're another human being. Find out what's really going on. Get through some of the BS a little bit, or some of the excuses, and get down to where you can really affect I like to say their programming, right? That's going to be a much better accountability conversation than if you're just like, hey, you're not hitting your numbers, get your what together, move on.
But people are so receptive to you for that very reason. Like, as a whole, the team trusts that, when they're approaching Jeremy, it's very much a conversation where they're going to be heard. And then from there, there's going to be solutions. But I think that makes a big difference in the way that you lead the team. What I have found too, and you do it successfully though. I used to be a teacher for a small amount of time, but the main thing that I learned was that every student, right, cannot be approached in the same way. Not everybody works the same. And so there's a certain level of like, hey, we don't have to have drinks on the weekend to respect each other. And respect is so integral to still learning from each other. And so regardless of where the personality differences may be, there's a bigger goal of coming together to be successful together. And, that's what makes us all drivers. So. Yeah,
absolutely. And what you're talking about is kind of wrapping back around to the culture, like you had mentioned before. And one of the biggest things that I want to circle back on that can steal the culture is if you do get somebody who you're having accountability conversations with, it's not working out for whatever reason. You get that agent in the bullpen that's a little bit of a cancer, right? A little bit of a downer, a little bit of a culture stealer.
Sure.
And it's usually not anything that we've done. Sometimes it just isn't working out, right? But a lot of the time, what I've seen is somebody's just not ready to own it and take responsibility. They might have a little bit more of a victim mindset, and that's why they're not succeeding. And I know everybody says hire slowly and fire quickly, but that is an area that you're gonna have that happen on a sales team. And the faster you figure it out and get rid of it, because it will bring down every other agent in the bullpen.
Wow, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just a huge thing and sometimes, the really hard one is when that's one of your top agents. Oof. And we've been through that before. I've been through that both in new home sales and here. You have a top agent that is they're a I'm going to beat everybody top agent. I'm going to do what I can to drag you down to make sure I win.
To stay
kind
on
of
the
top
top,
agent.
step on others.
They're super competitive, and I respect that, but they would step all over you in order to get a sale, know. And the best for the team is when, hey, I'm going to handle my stuff. I'm a top agent. I've got it together, but there's enough out there for all of us, an abundance mindset, and we can all learn together to get better. So those are the agents that we really focus on and make sure they stay happy.
I think that's what sets Oak and Ocean apart, because ultimately, like, there's just no fear in the way that y'all run business. Because think about how hard that decision might be for somebody who's in their first year to have a killer, but that killer is running other people off in their company, and then they're afraid to let it go. And then what ends up happening is over time they're not seeing the same level of growth. So I think that's a big deal for others to hear. Is there anything else, Jeremy, that comes to mind? I'm so glad that we did this podcast together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the last kind of culture stealer that I will mention is, we touched on it again earlier, but it's not only between the ISAs and the agents. You can have healthy discourse, or you can have very unhealthy problem between your closing team. Like that can be a very thankless job when they feel like the agents are just running in and dumping something on their desk. And so it's another thing for the CEOs out there to kind of watch out for, it's just overall, it's making sure that you've got people with good attitudes and they are respecting everybody's part of the transaction.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest pools. The sentence that you told me when I was coming in was, we believe in honest conflict over dishonest harmony, and making sure that if something comes up, like, we would rather have that hard conversation than to keep things hush hush. Yeah.
Absolutely, and we live by it. And I have to tip my hat to my business partner, Scott, because that is one of his skill sets that he's really good at. And man, did it make me uncomfortable in the first year or two. I had to learn about that. I'm out there. I'm they called me the golden retriever of real estate, right? So I'm out there meeting people and doing that whole thing, and he's very good at having some of those tough conversations, and I've seen the value of that. And I think our culture is where it is because of that. We're
awesome.
Not sweeping anything under the rug.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Jeremy Jenks, for coming and doing the podcast with us. Guys, tune in next week for all of the good things that we have to come. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to us on Instagram. We are so excited. Again, this is Conversion Code Podcast.
Thanks, Nikki.
Ooh.